interesting to me because I'll get an alert that
Yeah.
we're live while
Okay.
the kind of progress bar is still going. You might be live. We have no idea.
That's the beauty of YouTube. It's
So
a well-oiled machine except for this part.
right. And then what's funny is it pops up. So like if you're watching this, I have another screen right here and I'll be looking at it because I don't have enough of a memory to know about all the shit that I said over the past like weeks of us doing this.
Of
Uh,
course.
but but yeah, so what happens is you set it to go live,
Okay.
right? And then it opens up in this other screen over here, and it's like it's a progress bar going like, oh, it I think you're going to be live soon, and then it just shows up the actual live with volume. So like I have,
Nice.
and it's like 2 seconds behind. So then I have like both going at the same time. It's really awesome. It's I can't think of a better user experience than what they give you there. But I digress. So the reason we're here talking is we recently went through uh, a blog series that Beef and I did where we tried to put together a trade with every team in Major League Baseball, Sox, and then any team in baseball. Um, and we went into it thinking it was going to be pretty fun. I got to admit, it got not fun after a while because like it's very difficult to do this, especially like not matching up with teams. Like there's teams that don't need anyone from the Sox, and the Sox really don't need anyone from them.
Right.
Like there are definite scenarios like or like we need someone from them, but it's like their best player. Like they would never trade him.
Yeah,
So
you're never going to get them, or the deal harms you so much that you would never do it. And the way we did it, you and I, we didn't go like, okay, we have to do this division tonight. No, we you set up all the divisions in different blog posts, and then we just hit them with ones that we were interested in first. So by the time we got to the end, it was all the shitty ones that were bad matchups or that we just hated and didn't want to do. And so the last day plus of us doing them was the hardest because it was like these teams don't match up, or we can't even make up something fun about this particular team because like 15% of these are joke trades. The rest
yeah,
of them we tried to be as on point as possible.
like so the Bumgarner trade, I I looked at it, it actually works, and I think people are terrified to trade a Tatis and a starting pitcher for a guy like that. Like the scenario itself was definitely a troll, but I
Right.
also looked at it and thought if this happened, this would actually be a good trade for both sides.
When you were doing it, I loved the angle, but you're right, and especially because the Arizona Diamondbacks are low key a cheap ass team. So seeing them wanting to get out of that at a
Yeah,
point in time, especially with the Padres shooting past them, totally makes sense. You can totally see that happen.
like the Diamondbacks are weird because like they kind of were like the I thought they were rebuilding, right? Like they
Right.
traded Goldschmidt and they made some other moves where you're like they're rebuilding the team. They're going to try and rebuild, and then they went out and got Bumgarner, which was just weird to me. Like it
Yep.
felt like when you're watching adult erotica and the guy pulls himself out of the situation earlier,
Yeah.
like earlier than he should, and then
Yeah.
just like watching a guy smacking around for like 2.5 minutes.
Yep.
That is the Diamondbacks. That is the Diamondbacks team. Looking at them when I was like trying to figure out a trade, that's what I was thinking when I was looking at their team. But before we get into all the other teams, one of the things that happened when we were doing this was we started to come to some realizations about this Sox team by doing this. You're
Yep.
going through,
Sure did.
you're really studying not just the current roster to find holes, but you're also studying the minor leagues and kind of the entire organizational situation to understand who can be moved, what moves would make sense, who would be wanted from other teams, and how does the rest of the league look at these guys, right? So I mean, Beef, I'll let you start because I have a few thoughts on it, but I think we both came to a similar conclusion about one thing, and I'll let you start, and you probably go with that.
Yeah. So, we had discussed first, what did we learn about the White Sox in total with this exercise? And the main thing that I think we both learned, and we had talked about a little bit offline, was the White Sox total lack of position player depth in the minors makes it really difficult to make a trade because you can't offer up to teams the type of stuff that they're usually looking to get. If you look over the last several years worth of trades, especially trades for a valuable piece that could help you get to the playoffs or in the playoffs, the teams on the receiving side in general want young position players at up the middle positions and ones that are not yet on the 40-man roster and don't have pressure to be on the 40-man roster anytime soon. And so, like, for the White Sox, they have no depth at that spot right there whatsoever. I mean, there are young outfielders that are on the 40-man, our corner outfielders maybe. The next group of the teenagers, any one of the ones that you thought, oh, you know what, Bryce Bush will stick at third. Now he's in the outfield. Brian Ramos, he's going to be pushed off now. He's going to be a corner guy. Benjamin Bailey is definitely a corner guy, probably a left fielder because he can't throw. So you have kind of a lot of you drafted James Beard, but then you didn't have a minor league season, so you don't know if he is anything yet, even though he's got a lot of the athleticism. So the White Sox just don't have those people to trade, and they didn't have a minor league season last year to see if anyone else popped that you weren't really aware of.
Yeah, the general lack of depth is glaring, right? I mean, like you start to see it when you start looking at these trades, and you're kind of just like, where can I find someone that another team would go like, oh yeah, in a few years that guy's going to be something. And I think the biggest problem is we got a lot of those guys over the past few years in trades. Like we've been compiling trade assets.
Mm-hmm.
by dishing off, these guys, not only the big guys that we traded, but the kind of the end of the rebuild guys that were just still getting pushed off. So we accumulated a lot of these guys, and none of them really did anything. Like some of them, if they did anything, they're on the team. If they didn't, they're still kind of in the same part of the minor leagues that they were in when we got them, but they're older. So like, they're not that chip anymore.
Yeah, you're right. They either made it or they're kind of officially in the spot where they haven't made it. Like Zach Collins is not worth very much. And a team that would take a shot on him, it's like a reverse middle almost. You're going to have to sell him off at almost nothing, and if he succeeds, the other team is going to get the big upside piece of it. And that's the problem with, he ain't going to fetch nothing, but the other team has the upside kind of.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that there, and like the guys that did perform at some point in the minors, they've kind of fallen off, or they just didn't, or they plateaued. Like a guy like Alec Hansen, like who for a minute was like the hot name. He's Rule 5 eligible now, and they didn't protect him. So
I mean, they got a little bit of time, but you're right. It's looking like they're just going to let that one ride.
Right, and I don't know that anyone's going to go after him, and that's why like when I'm trying to put him in trades, I'm just like, does anyone find value in this? I mean, like there's glimmers of hope there, but like, I mean, he's at best a bullpen guy at this point, and there's a lot of that in the system. There's a lot of those guys, and that's a troubling part of the exercise when you're going through this. And when I saw the guys get added to the 40 the other day, like seeing Jake Berger get added to the 40, like that's great for him. Like that's a good story, and like you feel good about that. And he, like, if you look at him and you see him swinging, like he looks good. Like that's all very nice. Yeah. But like when you have room on your 40-man roster for a dude who just has not played, like, and you drafted him 3 years ago, like that says something about your depth. That says something about, you don't have the guys. Like what position is Jake Berger going to play this year? Like you can't put him on the team. Like he hasn't played.
Not on the White Sox. You're right. I mean, like he'll probably play third at Birmingham or something. But
sure,
I don't know that he's ever a third baseman in a major league roster.
Right, and if you're going to bring someone up to play the other corner, like Andrew Vaughn's coming up before him. So like his existence on the 40-man is that of convenience. It's not so much of like really having faith in him. And I like him. Like Beef, you remember when that draft came up and I saw him, and I was like, when I was going through all the draft stuff, I was like, I would love to get this guy. This guy looks like just my kind of guy. He's got a mash, and like maybe he has a position. Like, give me all those guys. I want the whole field filled with those guys. You know me.
I'm with you. And give me the bat over the defense every time.
And he's had incredible bad luck. Like, and but at the end of the day, I'm not trying to, shit on Jake Berger. Like I like the guy. I want him to
Right.
succeed. What I'm trying to say is if there's room for that guy on your 40 man, there's a problem.
Yes.
There's a problem. And when you go through this exercise, you see that problem. And like what's funny is a lot of people are like, hey, who wants this guy? And I'm like, well, who else can I trade? Like there's not a whole lot else. And so it led me to something else, which as I'm going through the other teams, I'm looking at is like every team has like this bad contract, right? At least one.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And this is a credit to the Sox. Like they don't have those.
They do not. No.
They have been very efficient in their spending. As much as I would shit on Rick Hahn, over the past few years, he has done an incredible job of being efficient with the money, like where he spends it and when he spends it has been really good. And at least in the terms of the window, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, with respect to long-term liabilities, yes, they don't have it now. It would have been nice if anything he did spend money on pre 2020 actually hit and could still be valuable on this roster.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the window, right? I'm looking at like you're in the window now. You're not bogged down by anything,
right?
And so I was like, oh, that's good. That part I liked, and that actually led me to make a lot of trades in these blogs with teams who had those bad contracts, but the guys were still fairly valuable. Like it's an okay guy, but he's way overpaid, and this team seems to be shedding payroll.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
like a Brandon Belt.
Yeah, I mean, you did the same thing with the Cubs with Jason Hayward, and truth be told, considering their position and Theo leaving, there might be even better buys on that roster too for just money that they're trying to dump and trying to get rid of salaries and contracts. That's always a kind of only certain teams tend to get out there and buy paper, and I would like it if the White Sox, they're positioned to do it.
They've done
it if they did it a little more opportunistically, sort of in this window.
They've done it before, so that I thought that felt interesting to me. That felt like a way to go when doing this. Like that seemed like something that might happen. That's possible. You have the pieces to do it, and your pieces are not so much the players that you're going to send off, but the money you're willing to take on. Right. And I think when you look at it, I think that they're positioned for that. I think there's not a lot of teams positioned for that, but there's one team that's way better positioned for them than that, and they're in the damn division, which is Cleveland.
Yeah, but Cleveland never spends.
They don't.
But so I don't think they'll do it this time. Like I thought you were going to say Detroit. Detroit is beautifully positioned
Detroit's
for that type of situation.
Detroit's still not there yet. I think they're like a year or two they're before they spend. But like the thing that like looking at Cleveland's roster, trying to make the trade with Cleveland's roster was it sucked, because this is something that I learned, as I'm looking at the rest of the league, and let's talk a little bit about what we learned with the rest of the league.
For sure.
Cleveland, like their starting pitching, their like rotation costs like less than Dallas Keuchel. The whole rotation.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they have a much better rotation than the Sox.
Yes.
And so like looking at that, I'm just like, well, I want some of that. Like
right, exactly.
And it's one of those things we were close to having that. Like if Cease and Lopez hit, you have that. You have that same thing.
Cease and Dunning hit this next year. If Kopech comes through and he hits, like they have a shot to have that thing, and which is why I kind of think they're not going to spend big on the pitching side in the offseason. I think they'll take a couple flyers and they're going to let the pile go. And you hired the fancy new pitching coach, and you see you make something out of this pile here.
I got that feeling too going through this process. Like you see, like there's as you're doing this, you start to see like you're not going to move this guy. Like you're not going to trade. You're not going to trade Kopech. You're not going to trade Cease. I think Lopez and Rodon you could, but I don't know that anyone wants them.
I mean,
So
Rodon, I think is no one's going to pay $5 million for that in this market.
the only scenarios where I saw to get Rodon to that other team is in the scenarios of taking on bad contracts, right? Where you're saying like I don't want to deal with this. You deal with it.
Right.
I'm going to take, but I'll take your terrible contract that you're going to send to me.
Right. Yeah, but the problem is you're doing a reverse arbitrage if you tender him, because the way the marketplace is looking, someone like him would not get $5 million if you could freely buy them. So they're just going to let him and the Nomar Mazars of the world go. And that doesn't mean they wouldn't go back and sign them for $1.5 million or something. Lopez maybe is a little closer because I think he's probably worth. Right? Yeah, I think he's probably worth his arbitrage, because when you step back and look at Lopez, just like clear set of eyes, you didn't see that bad last season, but you also, he's a number 5 starter who that generally stays healthy and eats up a ton of innings, right? He's not good, but he generally takes the ball. He gets you a 4.5 to 5 ERA, and he throws you 180 innings. Everyone can use that at $2 million. Every team can use that thing,
which is why I think the Sox might end up just keeping him.
I think so too.
But I also I don't see a tremendous amount of value in him. I couldn't. I tried to trade him like 100 times, and you could see it in the posts. Like he's an asset of some sort, but like not very valuable. Like so it was difficult trying to move him around.
One of the things that you bring up about Cleveland, about kind of the way they do business, and it led me down the path when we were looking at all these different teams about how different teams do business and how they start not being a fit for the trade pieces the White Sox have. I don't think a team like Cleveland is that terribly interested in the starting pitcher that throws 100 miles an hour. They like the guys who have control, and then they hope that they could bump them up a mile or two an hour, and they prefer to have the guys that throw 94 but have the control, and that's how they build their pitching staff. So they don't want those additional risk of those guys. When a lot of people on Twitter have been talking about the White Sox should trade Nick Madrigal, right? Because you could replace Nick Madrigal in the marketplace. But that's also why Nick Madrigal wouldn't be as valuable out there in the trade market. And when you start looking at teams, you see a couple things. You see either they're set at that position, meaning they don't need a cost-effective type player like that because they kind of already have one, or they have a star at that position.
Right.
2, the market has guys that are not stars. Let's say they're not, or they're similar caliber, all-in value of a Nick Madrigal. Or maybe let's say they're 80% of him, but Cesar Hernandez is going to be out there for $4 million or $6 million or whatever the fuck. So you don't have to trade any assets to get Nick Madrigal because you get 80% of them or 90% of them or whatever with Cesar Hernandez.
Yeah.
So teams are not going to be willing to do that. And another thing that I've seen a little bit of, and I think King Mac is a guy who I saw tweet this, and I've seen other people talk about it too, is Nick Madrigal is a valuable asset, but some teams don't value that type of asset. Right. There's going to be a disconnect. He's probably more valuable than the market thinks he is valuable. Like even I have some of that disconnect where like when we were looking at all the shit, it's like, man, is this guy really going to be any good? And then when you start looking at it in practice, you're like, yeah, it looks like the contact skills are there, and they're going to elicit some high BABIP, and he's going to have a high batting average. And that's the floor. Like 2.5 wins is probably his floor. I mean, assuming he cleans up the base running during regular season. But other teams are not going to value that correctly. You're not going to get that value back.
You know what's funny though, Beef, about that? About looking at because I thought the same. Like you noticed, I didn't trade Madrigal once because I didn't think we could get the value that he actually has if you put him on the market. And what's funny to me is like the people that love Madrigal hate Moneyball, and the people that love Moneyball hate Madrigal. However, he's the prime example of what Billy Beane would be looking for. Is a guy that people don't think is, he's too short. He's too short. He's got no power. We don't want this guy, so he's cheaper. He's an Oakland A, right? I mean, like exactly. It's funny how that kind of works against one another. Like because I think it's just people's misinterpretation of what the book is about. But nevertheless, I digress.
Sure. No, there's that angle there, and then I also noticed like we were talking a little bit about the pitchers, but even with Andrew Vaughn, okay, I think Andrew Vaughn was a top 3 pick. I don't think anyone debated that across any site, anywhere, prospects, whatever. But then when it actually gets into practice, Andrew Vaughn, what he he's not the 50 home run guy. He is going to be, in theory, a high productive first base bat. But when you start looking around at different teams, some teams attack first base with, we're just going to get the scraps from the waiver wire, like the Rays. The Rays are never going to put a lot of prospect value into first base. They're not going to go out there and spend money on first base. They're going to go pick up G-Man Choi, or they're going to, sometimes they'll play Yandy Diaz there, who they made a small trade and got. Like, there's certain teams like that where, I'd love to make a fit there. They never give you back what he's worth because they feel like they could piece that together for nothing. So why would they give you something for it? You end up with these mismatches of the way the Sox are set up. They're set up well for everything inside materially to be here, and for some of it to fail, but most of it to go along with it. But they're kind of poorly set up because to me, I thought the trade assets that they're flushing right now is young arms. Mm-hmm. The problem with dealing young arms is they're super volatile. So you have you're not going to get the same price as you would get for a similar position player, right? Because the risk is way higher on the young arms. So you got to put more of them together to get a similar package. And then the volatility will, in hindsight, like when someone's telling a future narrative, will kill you. Because most of the time they won't make it, right? The high volatility, but when they make it, they'll make it spectacularly, and everyone will fucking remember that they made it, So you've got kind of that thing working against you. And if you're a little bit gun shy on kind of making these trades, which I'm not ready to say Rick Hahn is, but from the last trade down the line, it looks like he is. So if you're even a little bit gun shy because you traded Tatis Jr. in the past, that's a scary spot to be in. It's scary to think, well, if I trade Andrew Dahlquist, he's someone's ace in 3 years, and then it's like terrifying to you. Probably what happens is he doesn't make it, but he could.
But I think to your point, the problem is not like if you were to give Rick Hahn, here's the trade, and you have to give one of these 3 pitchers to the other team. Yeah. I'm sure that he has enough insight into those guys to pick the right one that he doesn't really care about. Right. That it could still bite him. Like, you never know what's going to happen.
Right. Yes.
But it's usually, I want all 3 of those guys. And like, right. And when you look at the depth of this team and the roster, like, giving up 3 guys is like giving up like 30% of your minor league system. Like, it is a massive amount of talent.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it.
So I have to ask, because, we went through every team and we looked at all the different trade scenarios. Yep. And like, who's the guy, and it doesn't have to be the exact trade scenario that you laid down, but who's the guy that you saw out there that you thought about trading for, that you think is it could actually happen?
I think for me, like, kind of the most gettable guys are maybe not the ones I would like to see actually go through, but they're the type of ones that I could see the Sox pulling off, and that's kind of getting the mid-rotation arm. Just getting the guy that's going to be here long enough to hold the line while you let these younger guys come through. And I think there's probably enough of those guys out in the free agent market where you don't have to swing a trade, but you may prefer the asset that someone's holding as opposed to what's out there in the free agent market. The free agent market is extremely volatile, and it's going to be down to just the scraps very soon. Bauer's going to go, Tanaka's going to go. You saw Stroman and Gaussman already took their offers. I mean, you could play the James Paxton game for 1 year and $20 million if you want. I mean, but then there's a big drop off after that. So I thought, like, I made a small trade with the Orioles to get Alex Cobb. I thought that was something that could actually possibly happen. Truthfully, the way the A's do business, it wouldn't shock me to see a deal for Sean Manaea. And be able to grab a Sean Manaea out of there, because they're usually bringing up young pitching. Once the pitching starts to get expensive, then they kind of look for ways to divest from it and use the money elsewhere. So, like, one of those spots where they hit that, that mid-rotation person of need that this team could really fucking use. How about you?
See, I felt like in a similar vein, the 2 guys that I traded for, that I thought, I could see this happening because of the teams that are on the other side. and that was Joe Musgrove and
Yep.
Nathan Eovaldi. And I think the Eovaldi one to me had more legs because it, in theory, if you were to, and I think I send Rodon in the deal, but just make it anybody, right? You're just sending kind
Right.
of anybody, and you're taking on, I think it's like 2 and 34 that's left on his contract.
Yep.
I mean, it would make a lot of sense for the Red Sox to get rid of that contract. Like
Oh, yeah.
they're not going to compete this year in that division. That division's nuts. Like they have to really go back to the drawing board and figure some things out. So I would I would love to see the Sox go out and do that. I think Eovaldi is your 4 or your 5. I don't think he even fits that number 3, and that's expensive for that. But
Right.
he's a veteran guy. He's gonna you kind of know what he's gonna give you. Um, and at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, I think he's still a bullpen guy. I think he throws hard enough that he's still a bullpen guy, and like you get something out of it. And I know it's a lot of money to say, oh, just get something out of it, but it's one of those things. I think it's a risk, but it's a very calculated risk, and it's as risky as anything you're going to get in the free agent market, and you might end up paying more in the free agent market or be tied to it for longer.
Right. Right. No, how about let's flip this last question real quick here. How about what trade you would really like to see happen? Not one we think is realistic, because I think we're on the same wavelength about what's kind of realistic. It's going to be the trading little pieces. They'll try to take a contract from a team and get someone to eat 150 innings. I mean, like, I think we're on the same wavelength there. What of the deals that we did in here would you really love to see happen, even if you don't think it's that realistic to occur?
So I think people will hate this. Actually, they'll hate both of the ones that I thought were semi-realistic and would be very helpful. But the first one is Jason Hayward. Like,
Okay.
I actually think if you brought Jason Hayward into this team, it's a massive upgrade at the position.
Mm-hmm.
Now, mind you, it's expensive as hell to have Jason Hayward on your team because Tom Ricketts thought that this was something he should throw all of his money at, apparently. Now he's out in the street like Mel Brooks and Life Stinks. Like it's a sad state of affairs for the poor guy.
I know. I was weeping for him as well.
I know, man. You know, like you especially in a year where we all went back and watched Schitt's Creek. You know, you feel bad for Johnny Rose living in the motel now. Like it's heartbreaking. But really, I looked at that team and I thought, you know, is there a guy on this team that can help? And there's like 9. They have a lot of guys that could help the Sox. I mean, like,
really are.
If you didn't plan on bringing Vaughn up this year, you know, Kyle Schwarber is a guy that would be very helpful. I know Yu Darvish is obviously helpful.
Right.
Great pitchers are helpful on every team.
It's tough to get them though.
But yeah, but you know, thinking of guys that like you could actually obtain, and like Hayward just kind of stuck out to me because I think like they would be more than willing to get rid of that contract. And Hayward's been good the last few years.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yes.
You know,
and at a minimum, you got the glove side of it, right? So you've got a high baseline on defense at a minimum, right?
Which is going to help you out, right? It's going to help you out with Robert and center to not have to cover everywhere, right? And then it's also, from everything I've ever heard, a sincerely good clubhouse guy, like an actual like really good person, and a person who had some bad shit at the beginning of his career, bounced back from it and learned from it, and now, you know, kind of passes that on. You need a guy like that on a team like this, and you have one in Abreu. But like, what's Abreu's communication skills with the English speaking team members? Probably not much at all, right? And so having Hayward in there, I think would be a great fit. And then the other was the Bumgarner thing. Now Bumgarner, I think, would be a terrible fit for the team, like clubhouse guys.
Too much of a red ass.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think he gets. I think he gets along with La Russa, and that's it. Like like maybe Keuchel. I don't know. Even they might clash. I don't know.
Right.
It just doesn't seem like a fit for this team. But nevertheless, you know, yeah, he didn't look great recently, but like, he's got the resume. Like, he's got a fantastic resume. Like, if you could get him on the cheap because the Diamondbacks are trying to get rid of him, you take that every day.
Right.
How about you?
Because he kind of turned it around later in the season. I mean, for me, the two that I was really like, this could fucking work. They should try this. Number one was the Phillies go get Bryce Harper. And the reason why is because they've got a new GM coming in. They did their rebuild about the same time as the Sox. They fucked their rebuild up, right? Their rebuild did not make it. They did not go to the playoffs. They had these middling 80-ish win teams. And they've kind of blown it out, right? And they're at a weird spot. They could go out there and be the highest spender and maybe like cobble this back together. Or what they could do is trade off some pieces. And if you're the brand new GM, wouldn't you love to get out from underneath Harper and add parts in the process and then buy in a depressed market? You're never gonna get someone as good as Harper when you do this process, but you've got a little bit of a runway here. You're not expected to win this year,
and
they can kind of go out a little bit.
They've got a lot of holes too. That's the thing. Like I think, like they more than anybody in a rebuild, like had guys that they were like, this is gonna be the guy. Was not the guy.
Right.
I mean, yes. Scott Kingery is one guy that I can easily point to and say that is the case there. That he very much to me looks like a Gordon Beckham, like good ball player,
right?
But like he's not the guy that you thought he was going to be, and you kind of put a lot of eggs into that basket.
You know? For sure. And their young starting pitching for the most part failed. I mean, Aaron Nola's been great, but the rest of the crew right there, they haven't pulled together and done anything. And free agent signings have been colossal disasters for the most part.
And whoever was remaining, they traded off for Real Muto. So those guys are in Miami now, and now he's gone. So like,
you missed it.
What are you doing? Yeah. And that leads me to a question that I was going to touch on a little bit earlier when we were looking around the league.
Yeah,
we kind of flowed into some other stuff. So I want to just come back to this and ask.
Okay.
If you are in the NL East and you are the Nationals or the Phillies,
yep,
which of those teams should tear it down?
I think they actually both should. I think if I'm the Nationals, I try to do a quick turn because you've got kind of good assets on the roster, right? You've got Juan Soto, you've got Strasburg for long term, so you've got some stars already there. You got Carter Kieboom, who has had a little bit of a rough start, but he was a very high-end prospect as well. So you've got some basic parts there, and they were pretty good about going in the market and buying cheap shit and getting it to work. Like be able to plug it in. Oh, they've got Patrick Corbin too long term there. So you got kind of like, I did a trade with them in this.
Right.
I traded for Scherzer and for Trey Turner. Scherzer's in his last year. Turner's got 2 years left. So for me, those are like the key guys in that situation where I'm going to try to flip out of them. The way I look at these big market teams, especially the ones that are at those pivots like that, is the marketplace is going to get cheaper for a couple years. Right. And you have some star talent that you're likely to be able to unload, even if they got to throw money into deals to get rid of these guys, to get the assets back. They should be doing that right now. They should be reseeding because they're still going to be the high market, the high revenue teams. They'll be able to outspend everyone as the market stays depressed. Even if we get fans back in the stadium, the market will still be temporarily depressed for a little bit. So they could take advantage of the arbitrage of buying out in the marketplace. So I think both of them should do it. The Phillies probably it's more desperate. So the Nationals could like piece it together for one more year and try to win something.
See, I'm more in the boat of, so the Phillies I think should tear it down to the studs. And we had talked about this previously. We like when we were going into doing the Sox machine off-season things, I had the one scenario where we got Bryce Harper because I was like, well, I'm looking at this team and they should rebuild.
Yeah.
But the Nats, to me, what's interesting, like they have a lot of the same problems where there's holes in the team and like there's some guys that never panned out and then they just never filled those spots. And now what are they left with?
Right.
I feel like they'll fix it with money. I feel like this offseason, the Nats are going to go wild. Like they're going to pick up everybody. Yeah. When I heard about that possible Chris Bryant trade, I thought, yeah, that's going to happen. I don't see why that wouldn't happen. They're going to go after, all the top end pitch. Like, why not sign Trevor Bauer to a 1-year deal? Give him 1 year, $30 million. Like he would take that. He wants the 1 year, $30 million. He always wants the 1 year deal. They should give it to him. Give him 1 year, 30. and then next year give whoever else is the hot guy 1 year and 30. And just like I feel like the Nats are strangely positioned to try to bully that division and try and say like,
use a big stack, bully with the big stack.
yeah, like
right?
tell the Mets like, oh, you got all this new money, you got to really come to the table.
Yeah.
This is not some bullshit where you can just come in and say, I'm going to get 4 or 5 free agents and I'm going to like show the division. You got to get all the top end free agents because otherwise I'm going to bid you up.
I'd love it. I expect a pivot, but I would love it if they did go down that path, went and got Bryant, went and spent out in a depressed market and just popped themselves right back out. It's totally reasonable. And they're going to be back to full strength, after a year where they had some injuries and some down performances from people.
And they shed a bunch of their middling contracts.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. The Howie Kendricks of the world are no longer on.
Well, Eaton too.
Yeah. Adam Eaton is also
so like,
gone.
I mean, so like, do you think they're just gonna pocket that money? I don't feel like they're gonna just pocket that money. I feel like they're gonna spend that money, and they're just I don't know. It just feels like if anything I know about the Nationals, that they're going to try and outspend the entire division now that the division's really showing them some competition.
Yeah, fuck Steve Cohen, right?
That would be hilarious,
right?
Right? Like, wouldn't you like if you saw that press conference and you were the owner of another team in that division, like if you roll over and die after that, like fuck you.
Exactly. Yeah, the only other trade that I really would love to see happen, it's wild, it'll never fucking happen, but it's been making more and more sense the further and further we get along here. I would love to see the White Sox go to the Angels and go after Joe Adell, who had a very bad first, I guess, abbreviated year. Throw a bunch of young players that could help the Angels. So they're sort of mutual helping each other. And then the White Sox solve that outfield problem with Joe Adell. And you go from there. Like, you don't normally see high-end prospect for high-end prospect trades. So it'd be highly unlikely to me. But I think it's a good fit in both directions. The Angels are starved for pitching. The Angels could use an Andrew Vaughn to be like their long-term solution at the corner infield spot. It just seems like it makes sense, and I would love to see Joe Adell in outfield.
Did you take Pujols back in that trade?
Yeah, just to make the money, so that they were alleviating a debt, but Pujols isn't worth the shit anymore.
I mean, La Russa would love to have him reunited. Maybe he could do kind of like what he did with McGuire, and pump him full of steroids and then have him hit.
He'd be the DH, right? Because you're trading Vaughn, so like he's going to step in and he'll be a below replacement level player, but he'll hit 25 home runs and he'll drive in 90 runs. So it'll look cool, but it won't actually be any good.
Hey, those home runs are high up in the numbers, though, right? I mean, like, so
that's true.
We can celebrate all those.
Yeah, they're milestone home runs.
Well, Beef, thanks for jumping on, man. This was fun to just kind of talk through everything that we talked about in those blogs, and let's see how many of these trades happen. I'd say 10 to 15 at least.
I think so. I think the Sox will get front row Amy. They'll trade George Jacobs for front row Amy for sure. I heard that's going to happen. So
that's a pretty good move. And I mean, I reached out to the Cubs because we do have a pair of mascot pants over at the My Sox Summer House. So we can try and make this deal outside of the Sox. Like it could 3-way trade between the 108, the Sox, and the Cubs.
I love it.
It should happen.
Absolutely.